Well, now for more about that specific allegation that's been made about Judge Kavanaugh's conduct during his college years. As we said, the New Yorker magazine reported that Kavanaugh exposed himself to a woman named Deborah Ramirez while they were both freshmen at Yale University in the 1980s. Now, Kavanaugh has categorically denied the story, as well as the earlier allegation of sexual misconduct. Ronan Farrow reported on this for the New Yorker, along with his colleague Jane Mayer, and he joins me now from Los Angeles. Ronan Farrow, welcome back to the NewsHour. I want to go right to the allegation being made by Deborah Ramirez. How certain is she, and you've talked with her, that it was Brett Kavanaugh who exposed himself to her when they were freshmen at Yale?
She's absolutely certain, Judy, and one thing that I want to highlight is in cases of trauma and cases in which there has been heavy drinking, very often we see exactly what we saw in Ramirez's case, which is she took her time and was extraordinarily careful and really thought carefully about this. This was already being investigated on the Hill, which is something we reported in the article and something that prompted our reporting. And she knew that this was going to be a significant issue that would command a lot of attention. And rather than jump out ahead of it and say something incautious, she really turned over every piece of evidence and considered this carefully, and then decided, yes, she was certain, and she thought it was important to speak about this.
And you talked to all of the people who she said were present, who she remembered were present when this happened, and none of them was able to remember it. Is that right? But you were able to speak with someone who heard about it in the next day or so.
So this is corroborated by more than just one person, Judy. There's a number of people, including people on the record, who learned about this at the time. There's the individual you mentioned who was told right after, and independently of Ramirez, not someone who was in touch with her, recounted exactly the same fact pattern down to small details. That's a very credible person. There's an individual who saw a young woman crying, recounting the same fact pattern again soon after. That's an incident that Ms. Ramirez remembers, that she was crying, recounting this. And we have a number of individuals in the Yale community saying that this was known and discussed before Dr. Ford's allegation came to light. As to the people who were present, I want to point out something important that I think is often lost in the conversation. The individuals present who denied that this happened are individuals who Deborah Ramirez said were involved in the alleged misconduct, who egged on Kavanaugh, who taunted her. And those individuals did sign on to a statement, which we included in full, saying that they didn't recall this event and they thought Judge Kavanaugh to be an individual of good character.
In other words, you're saying they would have a motive not to acknowledge that what they knew.
I think it's important context to note that the statement of support is signed by 3 individuals who do have a clear stake in the allegations and are not impartial bystanders, and 1 other classmate that he rallied. There were 2 others who initially had supported Judge Kavanaugh in that statement, but came forward today and withdrew their names from that.
As you know, the New York Times is saying that they talked to 24 people about Ms. Ramirez's allegation. They were not able to get anyone to corroborate it. And as you also know, the Senate Majority Leader, other Republicans, the White House is saying that's a reason to suspect that this may not be true. How do you answer
So
that?
I want to correct your correspondent in what she said earlier. The New York Times did not pass on this story. They didn't decline to run this story. Dean Baquet has come out publicly and said that. This is a case where, as is very often the case with big stories, a lot of publications chased it. And the Times was among the ones that aggressively pursued Deborah Ramirez and repeatedly asked her to speak. She declined because she was working with The New Yorker and wanted to do this carefully with a reporter that she trusted. That's a completely reasonable judgment call, but that is why they couldn't find that corroboration level that The New Yorker found. And clearly, we also found other corroborators that they didn't. We also say that we made dozens of calls and that there were many people who didn't recall this or who didn't respond for comment. We have been extremely careful to disclose all of that up front.
You mentioned that the Senate found out about this, Democratic senators or Republican staffers in the Senate. Do you know the state of the investigation they're doing? Are they pursuing these allegations?
As I understand it, several of these offices are pursuing them further. At least 2 are investigating, and I know that at least 1 has had ongoing contact with Ms. Ramirez and her counsel since the story ran.
Is she prepared to come forward and speak publicly, to make a public appearance, to go on television to talk about this?
As you've seen with Dr. Ford, and as you now see with many of these attacks on Ms. Ramirez and her credibility. This is an incredibly taxing personal decision to make, how and when one comes forward. Ms. Ramirez has just made the difficult decision to speak publicly in the first place. She readily admitted that she would be attacked in exactly the way that she has been. And she has big decisions to make about what comes next. She has said that she would like to see an FBI investigation.
Ronan Farrow with The New Yorker, we thank you.
Thank you, Judy.